Hey, what's up guys? Welcome back to another devlog video. This week I decided we will do a little bit of a bug bashing bonanza. You may recall in previous episodes there have been a couple of different instances where a bug's popped up while showing a feature or testing something, and for the most part I've said we will tackle those later and get rid of them. So I decided it'd probably be, before moving on, a good idea to go ahead and tackle some of those now. So the first one we're going to take a look at is an instance where sometimes an item can be added to the inventory, but it shows that you have 0 of them. The reason this pops up is because of the way I handle items. So if you take a look here over in the inspector, you can see how many does the player have in an inventory. And then there's a count variable. This is to stop the same item from being added to the inventory multiple times. This way I can stack them and just show like a number of how many you have rather than having the same item take up multiple inventory slots. That's all fine and good. What it does is when you add an item, it checks if it already exists in the player's inventory. If it does, it just adds 1 to the count. If it doesn't, then it adds it to the inventory. The issue comes during removal. So it does the same thing. It checks if it's already in the inventory. If it is, it subtracts 1 from the count. And, well, if you're removing it, it always exists in the inventory, so let me rephrase that. It checks if you have more than 1. If you do, it subtracts 1 from the count. If not, it removes it from the inventory. But sometimes that causes 1 to still be subtracted, and you get 0. So if it's showing 0 here, the issue is next time that's added to the inventory, it'll be added with a count of 0. And so even though it's there, it won't be usable. So that's the first thing we're going to fix real quick. I'm just going to add a check during the add item function in the inventory manager. That checks if the count is 0, and if it is, it increases it to 1. So let's pull that up here. Inventory system and inventory UI manager is where I'm handling this. This one's easy, so we'll just fix it real quick on camera. So we're looking for the add item function. Equip button, non-equip button, remove item, add item. So here you can see if it already contains it, we just update the count and then we update the UI and get out of here. Otherwise, we add the item to the inventory. This is where we will check. So we'll just say if item.count is less than 1, item.count equals 1. Alright, and that should be all we need for this particular bug. Now, it'll do exactly that. It'll check if it's 0 or if something else has gone wrong and it's -1 or anything lower than 1. It'll just be set to 1 once it's added to the inventory. That should take care of that for any instance of this happening. Because the way it works is I use the event system I've shown before, and so in any other script it will raise an event with an item, which will then cause this script to respond with this add item function. So now that's the only spot things will be added to the inventory, so since that's fixed, that should resolve it. So then the next issue that we've been having that I keep saying I'm going to change or fix is with the inventory UI. So let me pull up Canvas here and we'll talk about inventory UI. We'll just make it visible here. And in particular, I am talking about the item slots and the quantity text. So for testing, we'll change the quantity to 5,000. You can see 5,000 won't hold there. I think we're going to max out the quantity at 999 though. So it'll go there and work. We're also going to align this to the right. And then move it just a little bit so it's not overlapping any borders. And then the other thing I want to do is I want to make it more legible, which I believe with a Text Mesh Pro there's a couple different options. Let's see. We don't want it to auto size, it doesn't look like. We'll give it an outline. I'm adjusting the wrong variables. I see that. I'm just also trying to see if maybe making those a bit thicker will help. And then we'll add an outline just like that. We'll apply these particular overrides. Then we'll just go back and make the text blank again, and because the way I did that, I'll just need to reapply that override. There we go. We'll hide the inventory background once again, and let's just run it real quick and see how that'll look. Okay, yeah, I'd say that's a whole lot more legible. But you can actually see here with the milk, we're having that issue I was talking about. The count is 0. Because that already existed in the inventory, the fix won't fix that. In fact, that's the one we made 0. So I'll make that 1 for now just to make sure it doesn't have that issue in the future. But yeah, I'd say those are quite a bit more legible, and now even with multiple, if the number's 2 digits or 3 digits, it always aligns right. So that's kind of what we were looking for there, so that's fixed. Let's just see what happened here. Okay, that's actually the next bug I wanted to work on, so I'll just show it to you real quick here. Basically, when I go to equip something, it just checks with the event system to see what the currently selected thing is, and then it takes the item slot and the item that's being held there. So what happens is, if your currently selected doesn't have an item, as you can see here, the null reference keeps happening. Because I do not have a null check for any of these to see if they currently contain an item before we do any of the code. So that was just kind of laziness on my part, but now it needs to be fixed. And just messing around here, I usually give myself a high quantity of items for testing. So I'm just noticing that the quantity counter doesn't turn off if the item's removed from the inventory. So we'll take a look at that as well. This is going to take a bit more time, so I think what I'm going to try to do here is go to a time lapse for this. So let's go ahead and fix this. Alright, so I went through and got some null checks in place to make sure that there's not a null item being passed before we pass it. During that, I did find an interesting glitch that I wasn't aware of, so I'll show you that too, that bug real quick here, which is if I miss one of these squares, one of these buttons, and accidentally click the background, that throws a null reference because it goes by what the event system has as the selected piece of UI, and so it's counting that as a selected piece of UI. So I did go through and fix this for most of it, but I left this just so I can show you guys. The easiest way to do this is right here on the inventory background. You'll notice that the image is a raycast target. If I unselect that, now it shouldn't be clickable. And so the event system should just ignore it. We'll test it out real quick just to make sure. No, we are still getting that null reference. Let's see. And that's because it doesn't have an item slot, inventory slot assigned to it, because like I said, it's not meant to be part of the inventory. Let me just make sure here that there's not anything else that could be getting clicked. It's probably this item slot background, so let's stop. We'll make it so that's not a raycast target either. Oh wait, no, that shouldn't be the case that the item slot background's doing it. Let me just take a look a bit further and see what's causing that. I thought that would stop it, so let me test it out and I'll check back with you once I've figured it out. Alright, so I figured out what was happening there. What I ended up having to do is adding another null check, because what I showed you, which was over here in the inspector, what we did was turn off that it was a raycast target. That actually did work, so that made it so the background wasn't clickable. But then what was happening is it was deselecting the currently selected game object. So right here, you could see that this is the currently selected, the one that is highlighted in gray. And so I've got it using the currently selected game object to determine which item's currently selected. But the problem is when you click off of that, now nothing's selected. So currently selected game object is now null. And that's where we were getting the error. So the way I solved that was actually with a second null check right here. It checks if the game object is null. And if it is, then we don't continue with the code. So that fixes that one. The next one that needs some fixing is actually the tooltip. We talked about it a couple times. It goes off screen like shown here. It also doesn't dynamically resize, which is something that we would like for it to do, so that way it's not always huge. So I'm going to get working on that next. Alright, so I've been working on the tooltip system. I wanted to go ahead and shout out Game Dev Guide. I watched this awesome tutorial designing a responsive tooltip system in Unity, and I used a lot of what I learned here to help me out with the tooltip system. So I'll show you in game now what it looks like. So we'll go ahead and run the game. And first thing you'll notice is the tooltip is now the size of the description. I made a longer description here so we can test that out, and as you can see, it makes it 2 lines and it makes it longer. And then if we go where the tooltip would have previously been off screen, it now centers it going the other way, so that way it's never off screen. You can always see what the tooltip would say there. Alright, so that's basically it. Now the tooltip system is working. It dynamically adjusts with size. It makes sure it displays on the screen for you. So that's what I wanted to show you for this. Now I've got to go through and check if there's any other bugs I can think of that need to be worked out. So that's what I'm going to do next, and I'll check back in with you in a little while. Alright, so I found one last bug that I had written down that needed to be fixed. It was a quick fix, so I just fixed it real quick already, but I'm going to show you a little bit of the code and what went into it. This bug had to do with my NPCs and how I deal with them. So if you look here, if I pull up an NPC, and you take a look at their attributes. So they need to have a conversation for when we first met, and then they need to have a conversation for when a loved item showed to them, a liked item, neutral item, dislike item, and a hated item. And then they don't have to have a shop combo, that's only if they own a shop. And then on top of that, they have their regular conversations. So the issue comes with when I'm too lazy to write all of those conversations and I just want to test out an NPC for something. So like this, you can see this NPC has none listed everywhere. Previously, when you would show him an item, you'd get a null reference exception because it's trying to pull a conversation that doesn't exist, and sometimes it would actually crash or mess up some game functionality. So what I did here was I added a default conversation where my conversation manager script just checks to see if the conversation exists. If not, it plays that. And so you can see I've got the name here as error just to let me know this line is being spoken because the dialogue manager passed null. And that's just to let me know if I'm expecting something to be passed, I can see, okay, for some reason it's getting null, but if I'm not expecting or I mistakenly talk to an NPC with something in my hand, then it won't crash. I'm just going to get this error dialogue. So that was the fix for that, a relatively easy fix, one that probably should have been implemented when I wrote the script, but we've got that taken care of now. So with that taken care of, that's actually going to take care of it for this video. That's everything I wanted to do. There may be some more bugs that I didn't write down or that I haven't found yet, and of course we'll talk about those when they come up and take care of those as well. So after this break for bug fixing, we're going to continue working on the game in the next episode. I'm thinking we're going to work on expanding the map a little bit and start adding some test areas to the map. So if you could, please leave a like on the video, leave any comments with questions or feedback, anything like that. And thank you all for watching. I'll see you in the next one.